Hello YouTubers, and today I am going to be reviewing the Underwater Menace 2023 Blu-ray. So yeah, I'm going to be focusing more on the animation side of things and that, and just comparing things. So let's start off with the packaging. So if you buy the Steelbook, you get fairly decent artwork on there, but if you buy the standard edition, yeah, it's the same case of the standard edition just kind of feels like half-assed artwork again. It's not as bad as some of them have been, but still, could be a lot better. But jumping into things, taking a look at the animation itself, before we get into that, this was originally going to be animated back in 2013/2014 by Planet 55 initially, and they'd actually started work on it. They'd done a few backgrounds and stuff like that, but it was something that was cancelled, and infamously then later on in, I think 2014, had a really piss poor DVD release. In fact, it might have even been 2015 by the time it actually came out, which had a noticeably terrible reconstruction on there that was purposely made to be as bad as possible. For whatever reason, I have no idea. But here we've got the same animation team who have worked on ones such as Power of the Daleks, Evil of the Daleks, the Faceless Ones, and unfortunately we have that same director of animation coming back again, even though she keeps saying that she's done with it. Anne-Marie Walsh. So yeah, I don't know why she keeps going back, because if you don't know who she is, look on the special feature for the Faceless Ones, where basically she is infamous for basically cutting as many corners as possible and basically making things as lazy as possible. So yeah, for example, they had a person draw up a really good Patrick Troughton model and that to use, where she said, great, let's not use it because it would take more time and effort. And she seemed proud of seeing this at the time, so yeah, and unfortunately, this is still the case here. The Troughton model and the Jamie models are the same ones used in the Evil of the Daleks, and yeah, they're not great, to be honest. The likenesses aren't particularly good. In fact, a lot of the likenesses in this aren't very good, to be honest, in the animation. Some are better than others. I mean, Troughton isn't horrible, and neither's Jamie to an extent. I think the problem with it is that the hairlines seem far too straight and smooth. Like, when you think of Troughton's hair, that is not something that comes to mind. It comes, messy Beatles haircut, but this just doesn't come across in the animation. We also have a case of, again, characters having different, designs and that to their actors and looking, in some cases, completely different, in other cases, more slightly different. It's not as bad as Abominable Snowmen were, where they just basically, apart from a few exceptions, just completely redesigned the characters, not even remotely looking at the actors in comparison. So at least that is not the case here. But still, a lot of the characters have differences for no apparent reason. For example, the Professor himself, for some reason, has vivid, white hair. But if you look at his hair in the surviving episode, the two surviving episodes, actually, that's clearly not the case. And it's the same with a couple of other characters. Yeah, it's just a bit odd, really. And speaking of which, particularly when watching this one, if you're like me and watch the animation books also with the surviving episodes switching between the two, this one is going to feel pretty jarring, more so than others. And I think the reason is because we start off with animation, live action for the middle, and then animation for the end. But it's also because the sets are just completely redesigned for the most part. A lot of them are just completely different. And also stuff like a lot of the fish people, which, yeah, you kind of forget the fish people don't really feature that much in the story, considering, they're on the cover, they're always, prominently featured, although they're not on the front cover of this one, actually. But, yeah, the fish people, I mean, they still look like fish people, but they don't look like that more iconic looking design of the fish people. And despite, what you think about the design, I still say they should have stuck with it, 'cause at least with, the face at least, because they just look nothing like them, unfortunately. It's unfortunate. I mean, it's not as major as, say, having actors be completely different, but, it's not a monster, but, it is the series' most iconic really thing about it is the fish people. And I know a lot of people say they looked crap, but still, they still have an iconic, presence and that to them. I mean, why do you think they're posted and that all over most of the releases of this story, and also bits of merchandise as well? And the fact that they just went for, a more generic type fish person just, annoys me. Although saying that, if you're like me and watch the surviving episodes, you won't really get to see the fish people very much and that anyway. They have basically a cameo in episode 1 and then appear very briefly in episode 4. Their main bit is in the surviving episode 3, so yeah, you can avoid them that way. But stuff like the temple and that is made a lot bigger, which I don't have as much of a problem with, but redesigning stuff like the idols and stuff themselves, and also now that the people just wearing masks rather than these ones that they have to hold up to their face and that, it's just changes and that like that. I can understand why they didn't have them holding up the masks to their face on a stick, because it will be a bit easier to animate them if they just, all the same sort of thing. So I can understand stuff like that. Speaking of the animation as well, if you're wanting to watch this in black and white, well, unfortunately, it is cropped to 4:3, and I know some people like that. I don't. Particularly when, and it's still a problem here, where we have characters either partially or in some cases almost completely cut off the screen in shots, and clearly this was animated and designed for 16:9 viewing. So yeah, the 4:3 black and white crop just seems to be a complete afterthought on there, and I just wish they wouldn't do it. It would be much better if it was just a black and white 16:9 one, because there you go. Because it doesn't really make it feel any more like you're watching a 60s story with, modern animation. Also, with the animation itself, sometimes at times the characters just seem to be holding their arms up for an extended period of time. I know particularly Polly does this in a few scenes. There are a few bits that kind of feel a bit stilted in places, but then there are other bits where the animation looks a little bit too smooth, where it looks like it's got an automatic walking animation on there, where it suddenly goes from very juddery stilted to then really, really smooth. I found that a little bit jarring, and that in places. I'd overall say, though, out of the team's animations and that, I'd say this team, the former Sun and Moon team, I'm sorry to say, I think this is probably their weakest one out of it, whether that was due to budgetary or time constraints, but it's not bad, per se, but it's definitely, I can see a lot more cuts and cost-cutting measures in here as well. There's also some stupid additions, like, for example, an octopus nearly pulling the lever, but then looking in dismay and then not. Why that was added, I don't know, but it was just bloody stupid anyway. In terms of special features, we basically just get most of the ones that were ported from the previous DVD release, which isn't a bad thing. We actually get a decent half-an-hour documentary called The Fishy Tale, which is on here. Which, thankfully, if you buy the Blu-ray of this, it's actually in HD. They haven't just ported over the standard definition version. This is actually the high definition version, so it's nice to have that in HD. We also get a couple of special features on BBC South Today, where it's basically about the missing episodes, or missing episode at the time, being recovered from back in 2011, so it's nice to have them on there. We also get an HD photo gallery for both the actual original story itself and also the animation photo gallery. We also get an introduction from Fraser Hines, which was for the original VHS release, as well as PDF material such as camera scripts and Radio Times listings. So, in terms of special features, It's not bad. There have been better ones, but in terms of it having a release, it's still nice to have them included. And obviously, the episodes themselves, the original ones, are included, though they are classed as a special feature. And unfortunately, they haven't had any restoration and that done with them since the previous time. But the good news there is that the restoration they previously had for the previous original DVD release was still pretty good, so it's not like we're going from something like with Evil of the Daleks, which hadn't had any restoration, I believe, since the 1990s, possibly the early 2000s. So at least then it's not a massive jarring change, and the audio, thankfully, is still up to code, whereas on Evil of the Daleks it was using, for some bizarre reason, an earlier restoration which was of much lower quality. So overall, what do I think of this release? Well, Underwater Menace isn't one of my favourite stories. I definitely enjoy it more than Galaxy 4, but it's not a story I've gone back to since I watched the DVD version back when it came out. So it's probably not one I'm going to go back to in a hurry. I'd also mention that the reconstruction that is included on here is also a new version, which is far superior to the original version, but that's saying nothing at all. Anything will be an improvement to that version. So, yeah, I don't know which version that I would watch. The reconstruction or probably the animation. But even so, is this a worthwhile release? Well, I'd say if you haven't pre-ordered it or bought it already, I would highly recommend waiting for a sale, particularly the steelbooks, which do tend to go on sale a month or two after the story initially comes out. I know a lot of people are just going to wait for this to inevitably be released on a Blu-ray set, but even so, by buying these, it does support the animation, and that can just mean, it can get money back and show, the BBC, like, hey, yeah, they're still selling, and I imagine this release will probably still sell decently enough. But, yeah, as for me, this is one, I will probably not go back to in probably a long time. But anyway, that's it for my review, and I'll see you whenever the next animation comes out. So, yeah, see you then.